Hello, 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 my friends. Thank you for joining me on Person Behind the Pages, the show where we get to know the creators that make the things we love. I'm your host, Nicholas W. Fuller, and I'm joined today by Adrian M Gibson. How you doing, Adrian?
Doing very well, man. I'm very, very happy to be here, hanging out with a friend and a fellow Break-ins author. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
No,
Yeah.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Hi,
Adrian!
Bo. How you doing?
Hey, Bert. Thank you guys for being
Bert's here
here.
too. Hi, Bert.
Yep. Got the SFF insiders, folks. Always follow me around. It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Those are the people you want to be following around.
Faux show.
Little
Faux show.
stalkers.
All right. So, Adrian, we've got so much to discuss. Of course, this is Person Behind the Pages. So, we're going to talk about your book, but then we're going to talk. I want to talk a lot about you. You're a former tattoo artist. You're a podcast host of SFF Addicts, which I'm a big fan of. You live in Ecuador, which I find is neat, but you're originally from Canada. You have an interesting story about how you met your wife. You're a huge nut for mushrooms, which, I mean, there's so much that we can discuss, you know? But first, of course,
for the conversation.
yes. Of course, first, I want to talk about mushroom blues. But even before that, I want to mention that, we even started to get to know each other because you flattered me months ago by saying, "Hey, Nicholas, I'd like to be on your show because I have a debut book that's coming out." And
No. That's not even how it started.
Okay.
You messaged me asking about podcasting. And we had a call and actually sat down and chilled and got to know each other a little bit. And then after that is when the book stuff started happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
So don't flatter me. Flatter yourself.
No. Well, I'm just flattered that you wanted to be on my show. That because I was already a fan of SFF Addicts. I've been listening for a while. Oh, I'm repping the shirt.
MJ told me. Yeah, she told me you were wearing
it. had to wear it today too. Nice. Had to figured. Right. Yeah, man. So appreciate you being here. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mushroom Blues, dude, debut novel. Pretty hype. We're talking just before about there's a little bit of word of mouth going on, huh? Just a little bit.
Just a smidge.
Right? Pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
So I wanna introduce, if anyone kind of hasn't heard about Mushroom Blues, I want to kind of introduce some of the story elements a little bit.
Okay.
So, tell me a little bit about one of your main characters, Henrietta Hoffman.
Okay.
Go.
So Henrietta is a cranky middle-aged woman. She's human, but she is a homicide detective working in the city of Neokanoko, which is the capital city of Hapon, an island nation akin to Japan that is inhabited by mushroom-headed people. And Henrietta is mycophobic, which means she is put off by mushrooms. She's disgusted by mushrooms. So her being in a mushroom city is a very inconvenient thing for her. But she's also a detective in a force that is mostly run by and filled with men. And so she has to deal with that. And then on top of that, she has a very traumatic past. And she also has these cultural sort of perspectives that she's brought from Caprinia, the nation that she came from, where she views the mushroom people with disdain and she is discriminatory towards them. And much of the story is about her transformation and her awakening as she comes to understand how the truths she thought she believed in were constructed by somebody else, by institutions, by governments, what have you, and that her truths, as she experiences all the events in the story, are very different.
Love it. Okay. All right. Very interesting. Like the truth angle, trying to, see, unwrap these mysteries within mysteries, right?
Exactly.
Solve a murder and discover, yeah. All right. Tell me a little bit about kind of one of your other main characters, Koji.
Koji is the first character that I ever created for the Fungalverse, which is my interconnected fictional universe.
And he's he's back there behind.
He's right here. Yeah, this guy right here. So I actually drew him first. He's one of the early drawings that I did as I was imagining the Fungalverse. And this is him when he's older. He will appear older in a future book in the fungal verse. But he fought through the Spore War. He's native to Hopon, grew up on the fields around Mount Maitake, on a rice farm. So he has humble origins, but now he's in Neo-Kanoko, and he's part of the Neo-Kanoko Police Department. He's the only fungal on the force. And at first you don't know why. And then you start to figure it out. And over the course of this series with Mushroom Blues and its sequels, it's going to become more apparent his role and how he ended up there. And a lot of Mushroom Blues is about his and Henrietta's burgeoning relationship as they kind of go from, enemies to friends.
Love it. Love it. Okay. All right. So really, Adrian, this was all a ruse. This is just me teasing information out of you so that I can now build a Mad Libs in a movie trailer format for Mushroom Blues. Are you ready?
Ooh,
Ready?
I like it.
You ready?
Let's do this.
In a world torn apart by war, one human detective must solve a murder before everything falls apart. Henrietta Hoffman is a cranky middle-aged human, a homicide detective in Neo-Kanoko, but she's microphobic, terrified of all things mushroom. Koji fought through the Spore War, fighting against the humans, but now he works with them as one of the only fungal within the entire police force. As they work together to solve a mysterious murder, they'll discover truths that they thought were true were actually foisted upon them by others. It's all right. It's falling apart a little bit, but we've got the Blade Runner.
Just like the city of Neo-Kanoko, your performance fell apart. I loved it though, man. I adored Mad Libs as a kid.
Yeah,
that's what my parents would give my brother and I when we went on road trips. They would just give us here's a bunch of Mad Libs, and we would fill it out with butt and penis and all kinds of stuff that would just make it ridiculous.
Nice.
Bravo though. You held together for the most part.
Yeah, I was almost there. I wanted to also, you've got Blade Runner, True Detective, and District 9 meld with the weird worlds of JEFF VANDERMEER, Philip K. Dick, and China Miéville, Mushroom Blues, a Fungalpunk noir, police procedural. Definitely, you got kind of the weird going on. You've got your own vibe, which I love. But you wrap it in the familiar of the police procedural. So it's very accessible. I love too that you kind of the setting is very inspired by post World War II Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was very important in the sense that actually I did a text Q&A with a friend of mine, Eleni Arguiro, for Before We Go blog. And so shout out to everyone over there. But she asked me a question about this because Japan very often, I think in cyberpunk especially, but just sort of in, you could say broader sci-fi, it pops up as sort of aesthetic window dressing for worlds where, okay, I'm going to knock on one of my favorite movies of all time, Blade Runner. I adore it in so many ways, but there is an aesthetic of sort of East Asia, whether it's Hong Kong or Tokyo or what have you. There is an aesthetic in that movie, but it serves no purpose. It's not actually incorporated into the narrative itself. It's just oh, here's Rick Deckard in a really rainy street at a stall eating noodles. And it's it doesn't serve any function in the story itself. And so for me, it was I'm going to use Japan as inspiration because I adore Japan. I love this country so much. I've loved it for pretty much my entire life. And that comes in the form of food and anime and manga and art and history and culture and religion and all these different facets that make Japan what it is. But for me, using the fungals as sort of an analog for this it was a
Mhm.
way to discuss alienation and xenophobia, these things that have been very prevalent in Asian communities and Asian cultures, especially in their interactions with the West.
Hmm.
So Japanese people around the time of World War I, for instance, a lot of people might not know there were internment camps in the United States for Japanese people.
Oh, actually, I did
Based
not
on
know World War One. I knew World War Two. We had
no,
those,
no, no.
but
It
I
was.
didn't.
Did I say World War I? I meant World War II.
Okay, okay,
So there were internment camps
yeah,
in America during World War II. And so people might not know that, but that the fact that the Japanese Empire was part of the Axis powers
yeah,
made American people or people in the West much more xenophobic towards them. And so a lot of this book is actually a conversation about that through the lens of, okay, here's this human woman and this human culture, and they've invaded this fungal city, this fungal nation.
yeah,
And there is the difference just in terms of biology. But there's also the difference in terms of culture and how these two cultures kind of clash together and the ways in which xenophobia manifests and how that dictates the actions that so many of the people in this world have. And so it was much more interesting for me to use Japan as an influence, but base it in the very
Mhm.
fabric of the world,
right,
into
right,
the culture of the fungal people, into their country and their customs and their language, but also the ways in which all of that encapsulated
right.
interacts with a contradictory culture. So all of this is just different conversations as opposed to it's sort of like aesthetically based on Japan, but it doesn't actually serve any value to the story
Right,
itself.
right. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Um. So I want to talk about. Let me. We're gonna do this real quick. Whoops. Yep. And then let me. I'm gonna do. I want to talk about your cover. So I'm gonna
Okay.
show the cover, and I might go silent for a little bit while I show the cover. But tell us about your cover. Tell us about, obviously Koji and Henrietta are on the cover.
Mhm.
What are we seeing? Who made the cover? What role did you have in making the cover? All these could tell me everything. Tell me everything.
All the juicy details.
Boom.
Okay.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So that, is the cover for Mushroom Blues.
Hey,
Louise. Hi, Louise. How
what's
are you?
up?
Okay, so that is the cover for Mushroom Blues. Just right off the bat, Felix Ortiz was my artist, and he is absolutely incredible. He was such a pleasure to work with because we've known each other for years now. He was on my podcast back in the early days. It was like episode 12, as part of a panel on cover art and design. And so I met him through that, but then I started to see like, oh shit, he's doing the covers for everyone, like Rob Hayes books and like Mike Fletcher books and all these different amazing authors who are in the indie scene. And Felix was just creating this insane library of works, this insane body of work that I just fell in love with. And so I knew like my debut novel, I'm going to do it with Felix. Like I have to. But at the very same time, because I'm a control freak and I do have a background in art, I was able to prepare for him a very comprehensive art brief, which included information about, like the very vibrant blues. That was part of the color palette that I provided him. And then I sort of laid out the key components. Like I want a police card. I want them sitting on the hood. There's Henrietta on the right. There's Koji on the left smoking a cigarette.
wow.
And in the background is just very sort of like foggy and moody because this book takes place in winter. So there's like fog on the street. There's sort of like rain. There's mushroom architecture all around. A lot of that was based on the brief that I gave Felix with references to different types of mushrooms, drawings that I've made of fungal architecture, sort of key details about what's going on in the city and that kind of thing. Like on the back of the cover, there's a soldier, there's sort of like a military looking truck, but there's also a very destitute looking fungal person. There's a lot of homelessness and poverty going on in Neo Kanoko, but Felix just captured it perfectly. And it was beautiful. Like he basically did it over the course of like less than a week.
Damn.
Where he sent me sort of like a structural piece in terms of like, here's like the layout and the angles that I'm aiming for. This is how I want to like represent the street. And then I just sent him back my notes of like, I want to move this over here. I want to tighten up certain things. I want to add this detail. Next day he came back. It was more detailed, taking my notes into account, starting to do more with color composition. And then that just back and forth for 3 or 4 days. And then on the 5th day, he gave me the final artwork. And after that, I did the design myself. Since I have a background in graphic design, I was able to do the typography and the layout of the cover and everything like that. So yeah, it was just a very smooth process. And I'm very, very blessed that I got to work with Felix on that.
I'm so blown away. That it's amazing. Like, well, I'm super impressed that you had kind of that vision, because the first time I was like, okay, like the very first time I'm like, let's do a cover. I was like, wait, Amazon has a cover generator. Let me put in like an old painting and like and it looked awful. It looked awful. But the second time I was like, I have no idea. Here's kind of what the book is about. Help me out here, designer. And like they did some concepts and it really helped me kind of like hone in. But yeah, even more so like with time, I've been like, okay, actually those concepts had some pros, but not anyway. But the fact that you're just like, I want this very specifically, car, Henrietta on the right, Koji on the left. Smuggies are like, damn, like
I'm a very visual person. So it's like even when I'm writing, I visualize things a lot in terms of the sort of like skeleton of a scene.
That makes sense.
And then like with the fungal verse, even so much of it, like what I had in my head of like, this is what the fungal people look like. I had to draw it out first.
I forgot that you kind of like cheat in this process because you actually are a visual artist also. Like,
yeah, so it's like, so I knew that giving him a detailed art brief in terms of what I did provide is exactly what I would have wanted to get. You know, to have like here's like legit like for Koji, my visual reference was Ken Watanabe, and for Henrietta it was Kate Winslet in the TV show Mare of Easttown. And I was like, this is like, it doesn't have to be like exactly like them, but this is more or less the sort of vibe that each of them has. This is like the more generalized look that each of them has.
Right. Love it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, let's go show it once again. Look at it. Look at it.
It's
such a hot cover. Yeah. Yeah.
The blue is just like, God damn, like you just nailed it with like the color composition is just fantastic.
It's no wonder your cover reveal blew up, you know, like because it's a hot cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, if anyone's in chat and you want to say hi to Adrian, say hi in the chat. You have questions, drop them here. Happy to ask. Also, while you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us out. Help us, spread the word. Amazing cast. True. So yeah, love the cover. Talk to me about your is it still a fan cast if it's the author? Yeah, good point. I don't know. You know, with the Kate Winslet and the Ken. I'm voting no. It's canon. It's canon.
It's canon.
Yeah. Talk to me about your staggered release that you got going on now, which I think is actually like really cool. I think a staggered release is really smart because you kind of are able to highlight like more things keep coming, you know. So you've got, I mean, we're days away from ebook and paperback, right?
Yeah. So ebook is out on Tuesday. I've just like had a shit time with formatting. I was telling you before we started recording about chaos. So yeah, paperback is going to be out like just a day or two after after the ebook. But then after that, it's like April 2nd is the hardcover. And April 16th is the audiobook, which I am narrating with the help of a friend here in Quito. He's doing like all the production and sound design and stuff like that. But yeah, like the staggered release was more or less a decision because I had in my head originally like all on the same day. But as an indie author, there are just so many things that you have to manage. And as it started to like pile up, I was realizing, holy shit, I've got way too much on my plate. And all of it was self-imposed, right?
Yeah.
But then I talked to my friend Crystal Matar, and she was saying like, there's the only one putting pressure on is you. And so you can give yourself flexibility. And for the most part, like people who are fan of indie books know there's an expectation that they're not going to get all of the editions on day one. You know, it might be like the hardcover comes out a bit later. It might be like for sure the audiobook comes like 6 months later, sometimes even a year.
Right.
So for me to be able to kind of like stagger it just a little bit, but enough to give myself breathing room and enough to kind of like keep a bit of momentum from one edition to the next.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It probably, you know, you can definitely lose momentum if you're 6 months out before the audiobook, right? But again, like you are going to have exciting things to talk about for weeks because of the way that this is. I think it's to me. I get this wasn't Plan A, but I think it's a positive. You know.
Yeah, and it is like, of course, it's not Plan A, but I think one of the coolest things about indie is how you can be super flexible on a much tighter time frame. It's like you can pivot in so many different ways, and for me that's exactly what I strive on. It's like if I were to go into traditional, I talked to MJ Kuhn, my co-host on SFF Addicts, about this, like trad, it's just like a slow churn, and there are times where she's like, I'm anxious for weeks just waiting for a single email. You know, or like right now, or like having a book on submission for like 8 months. To me, it's just like, no,
fuck that.
Wholeheartedly fuck that. So, like I think it is very lucky for indie authors to be able to have that flexibility, because everyone has shit going on in their own lives, and indie readers are very forgiving. About like certain things. They're not necessarily going to be forgiving if the book is shit.
Well, sure. They
are going to be forgiving if they appreciate what an author does and are willing to give them a little bit of flexibility and be like, don't worry about it. Like, let your book come out when it comes out, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, that has been very, very heartening. And relieving a lot of pressure.
Well, I'm glad. Good. There's enough shit to worry about. We don't need to make it harder on ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Well, but talk to me about the audiobook process. How have you been? Have you liked recording the audiobook? Obviously you've been doing podcast for a while, but this is a little bit of a different beast. Is it enjoyable? Do you think you're going to want to do it again and again and again? Or are you like, you know what? This is great for book one, but no.
I actually really enjoy the process, but
jeez,
the only thing is that it takes a long time.
It
is a lot of work. And I don't think people realize how long it takes. Because
do you know how many
audiobook, like a finished audiobook could be like 12 hours.
Right.
But it took the narrator, like 18 to 24 hours to record it, because you're doing multiple takes. You're kind of feeling out the characters, and sometimes things just aren't working, especially in my case where I'm doing this for the first time. And what I found is that the first few chapters took me a long time to kind of navigate. In terms of like finding my narration style and kind of figuring out how I want to approach the individual characters and whatnot. So it was like a 15-minute end recording took like 40 minutes, for example.
Can I tell you, I've recorded just the first chapter of my work in progress for like a friend. I just record, just for fun. They do a lot more audiobooks than they read, but I wanted to share it with them. But like, I wanted to have like my main character have like kind of a like gravelly voice a little bit, and I was like, well, crap, which like it was the right sound, but I can't carry that voice. Like by the time I finished like 3,000 words, I was like, what I mean? Couldn't do it.
I found that a very good trick is to have like a big cup of water, but with a straw, so that I can just like kind of like take mini sips. Here and there, just so my throat doesn't get super parched during the whole time. And then obviously like have a container of chapstick or like Vaseline like right next to me, so I can just like put it on my lips, because those are the two things. It's like dry mouth and dry lips. And you can hear that in a recording
Hmm.
where once like your saliva starts to get dry,
Mhm.
it starts to make like clicking sounds depending on what you're saying.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's impressive though. Like if you're able to already be recording like a finished hour in 1.5 or 2 hours, I think that you're doing really well if you're doing it that fast.
yeah, I mean, podcasting really helped me to
Yeah.
be confident about my speaking abilities. So
Mhm.
it was more or less like podcasting broke down the biggest barrier that I think anyone would have to becoming
Yeah.
an audiobook narrator. But Bo's in the chat. Adrian, did you grow up in Japan or how did you end up there? I didn't grow up in Japan and I do not live there now.
So, yeah, I
Um,
think you're he said Quito, but he's in Quito, Ecuador, not like
yeah,
Kyoto,
not Kyoto.
Japan.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just when I say Quito, I say it with like a Spanish kind of flavor. So it kind of maybe sounds a bit like Kyoto.
Have you ever visited Japan, or are you just like
Yeah.
okay.
No, I've been there twice. So
Nice.
last time I was there was 2019. 2019. My wife and I went there for our 1-year anniversary / honeymoon,
Oh, sick.
which was
Nice.
amazing. Like we went to Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and Hiroshima. And so we did like a big trip through all of those different places and had some like incredible experiences. Just like Tokyo is insane. I feel like you could just go to Tokyo and end up spending like a lifetime there.
Right.
But I also really appreciated kind of seeing smaller towns because we just took the train. Like we just took the Shinken just like all over the place and just went from Kyoto is like half an hour to Osaka, or I think it's like an hour and a half to Hiroshima. So it's like you
Mhm.
can pop around to different places and it's very, very flexible and easy to manage because it's very organized, kind of like systematized country in a lot of ways.
Have you
But
heard? Go ahead.
go ahead. No, it's okay.
No. Yeah.
But one of the coolest things for me was kind of like the dichotomy between how futuristic Japan can be,
And
but
traditional.
also how traditional and how much it really respects the history and the culture that made it what it is. So it's like you can have high-rise buildings
Right.
and little shrines and temples mixed in between, where people who are still practicing Shinto and Buddhism go to on a daily basis as part of their sort of like life ritual is just really beautiful.
Yeah, that's rad.
Yeah.
Have you so much to still get into, including I see your question, Bo, and that's definitely one of my questions that we'll get into. But have you heard the thing? I don't know if this is true, but I've seen it on the internet a couple times where like the Japanese like public transit was like the routes were mapped out by like some kind of fungus. Have you ever heard that?
It wasn't originally mapping out. So basically
Mhm.
what they did was they
I knew
wanted to
you'd know
see.
this. I knew you'd know
Yeah.
this. Tell me.
Okay. So they did a laboratory test where they wanted to see the spatial intelligence of slime mold. And I will tell you, slime mold is a distinct species. It is not fungi as we think about it. It is not mold. It is not mushrooms. Slime mold is its own. They're like distant relatives. So there's that distinction first of all. But what they did was they looked at one of the most organized cities in the world in terms of its transit system, Tokyo. And they thought, how can we figure out the intelligence of slime mold, the spatial intelligence? And they basically let the slime mold loose in this recreation of Tokyo. And what ended up happening is the slime mold, the directions that it took and the intersections that it created were pretty much identical to the Tokyo transit system.
Because that layout has been designed to be the most efficient.
Exactly. Right. It has been it was purpose built to be the most practical
Right.
and efficient system for Tokyo, and the slime mold was able to replicate that just based on its spatial navigation of the like experiment space. So super
Which
cool.
is right, kind of weird, creepy, but also like super amazing, you know?
Yeah. I mean that's what's so unbelievably cool about fungi and about mold and all these different things, is that they have intelligence, but it's just not what we consider
Right.
sort of like relational to what is human intelligence, but fungi and mycelium, they have their own forms of intelligence that make them very core organisms in the entire ecosystem of this planet. But we believe that we're smarter just because we speak and have conversations with each other. But fungi are having conversations with each other too. It's just through chemicals and
That's
like
okay.
pheromones and stuff.
So we've already talked a little bit about mushroom blues. I wanted to make sure right at the gate we're like, we're talking mushroom blues, we're pitching the book. Now, it's the person behind the pages. So I want to talk about you. Like first, as we're kind of transitioning, I want a little nod to you. I want to hear an interesting fact, which is definitely going to have to be some more about mushrooms. And I want to hear a soundbite writing advice, please, because I know those are your questions that you always ask.
Ooh, okay. So soundbite writing advice. Let's see. This is the trickier one for me. I think since we're here talking, make friends in the community, and find those people that you really click with. It doesn't have to be exactly what you and I have done. Yeah, like Louise, the break-ins. Like a Discord community, people that you can DM and just kind of vent to and ask questions and everything that I have succeeded at in the sort of like lead up to the launch of Mushroom Blues. So much of it is in large part due to the people that I was able to ask for help. So I think don't be afraid to just kind of put yourself out there and navigate the space a little bit like slime mold and figure out who are the people that I click with the most, and we can mutually benefit one another as well.
Love it.
Yeah. And you want like specifically a mushroom fact?
Well, I feel like, we could probably talk for like the next hour where I just ask you questions about mushrooms and you drop knowledge bombs. But let's do some of that. But let's start with, you kind of alluded to the way that they were able to kind of communicate through chemicals. And I think some of that has to do with like the spores that they sent out. So tell me, how does that shit work? And what degree of communication are we talking about? What can one mushroom say to another mushroom, Adrian?
It's not about the mushrooms. The mushrooms aren't doing the communication.
Okay.
It's all about what's under the ground.
Okay.
So mushrooms are basically just vessels for releasing spores.
Okay.
That is like their core purpose. And spores, the only thing that they exist for is to drift on the wind and land on surfaces and propagate that particular fungi.
Okay.
So mushrooms and spores are more like tools for the sexual reproduction of mushrooms.
Okay.
But everything else, the intelligence of it, the communication is all underground with mycelium.
Okay.
And so the mycelium are basically like the roots of the fungal system.
And the mushroom is just you said like reproduct. So the mushroom's just a penis.
Yeah, mushroom is just a penis. Mycelium is the body. And
okay, right.
So the mycelium, they're like filaments. They're white, hairy roots, and they move through the ground, and they have points called hyphae, which are kind of like these sensitive tips that probe the environment and react to it and figure out like, is this a direction that we want to go based on like the composition of the soil, or if there's like a wall or some sort of barricade or something that won't necessarily benefit them. And then at the same time, those mycelium, they will sort of interconnect with the roots of trees and other plants and organisms within the biome of a forest. And what will happen is like the mycelium and the roots will communicate with each other through chemical signals. And the mycelium will give nutrients to the tree. It's called mycorrhizal is the term, which basically means like myco, mushroom, rhizal, rhizome, which is roots. So mycorrhizal is just a symbiotic relationship where trees and mycelium exchange vital nutrients and things that they need to survive. Trees take in carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. That oxygen is transferred through the roots to mycelium. Mycelium gives things like nitrogen to trees, which it takes from the soil and gives to the trees and helps that tree grow bigger. So a lot of the forests that exist in this world, the reason they're so big is because of that relationship.
Wow. Is it like so? And is it are words?
Did I like explode your mind?
A little bit. Are there you know, a lot of the forests that are biggest in the world are like redwoods? Would redwoods not be as big as they are because of mushrooms?
Yep. They would not be able to sustain the nutrient density that they need to grow that tall were it not for the fact that mushrooms and mycelium are present.
That is wild and awesome.
And that's why so much of the world that we live in is a result of relationships with fungi. So without that relationship, trees wouldn't be able to grow as big. The Amazon rainforest, for example, wouldn't have developed in the way that it has, in which case the oxygen percentage in our atmosphere would be lower were it not for the presence of fungi. And so the world that we live in today is survivable for us based on our oxygen needs because of the trees that were able to propagate, the forests that were able to propagate based on their relationships with mycelium.
Amazing.
So you and I are alive today because of
mycelium. Yeah.
Because
if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Adrian M Gibson. He's the debut author of Mushroom Blues. I'm showing the cover again here. And we've discussed a little bit on our YouTube chat already about Mushroom Blues, but now we're kind of getting into Adrian's wild fascination with mushrooms, which is super interesting. My wife is she has a degree in chemical oceanography. She's a huge nut for everything in the ocean. And like, it's interesting too, the way, you know, like things that I've learned from her, like, you know, the oxygen that like algae produces in the ocean is significant and we would be screwed without it. You know, it's amazing how many different things there are that like contribute to us being able to be alive that we're not even aware of whatsoever. Absolutely wild. So this is super cool. And I do find this fascinating, but like, tell me more about like, what is it about mushrooms specifically that makes you like so fascinated by them? Because this is a multi-year long fascination, right? Like you've done mushroom variant tattoos on people for many
I can show one of my own mushroom tattoos.
Look at you.
Wait, I'll just take my camera off of the computer and just put it right there. There we go.
How old is that tattoo on you?
I tattooed that on myself maybe I think like 9 years ago.
So yeah, so at least 9 years you've been obsessed enough with mushrooms to want to
get
on your body.
Way back. It's like far longer than a decade.
So how did the mushroom fascination even start, you know?
Basically because I grew up in British Columbia, in Canada. It's like so lush, and when people think of rainforest, they probably think of the Amazon or like the Congo jungle, or the jungles in Southeast Asia and Indonesia, but there are just rainforests everywhere. I think people's definition of rainforest is a bit skewed towards tropical regions, but there are temperate rainforests, and they are very lush and very wet and full of life and very beautiful. And that's what I grew up around. I grew up around trees. I grew up around, you know, like bugs and birds and squirrels. And yes, there were cougars around where I lived, and my parents didn't give a shit enough to say like, don't go out into the forest with your brother and your friends alone, because there are cougars out there and they could eat you. Like cougars would show up to my elementary school and we'd be locked inside until it left the property. kind of until they got animal control up in here.
That's so funny.
Some Okie dude says,
Yep.
have you read Jeff Vandermeer? He is very fungal. Jeff Vandermeer is like one of my favorite authors.
Yes.
Ambergris
yes.
trilogy, the Southern Reach trilogy. He is like the biggest inspiration for me as a writer.
So we've had a few people just join, so I wanted to go pop up the cover again. This is the cover
Caden's
for
here as well. Hi, Caden.
Legends.
Hey,
Yeah.
buddy.
Dr. Love.
Dr. Love is in the building.
So Mushroom Blues is Adrian's debut novel. Of course, Adrian, many of you probably know him as the co-host of SFF Addicts. Yeah, glad to find another Vandermeer fan. Yes, like Adrian has kind of pitched Mushroom Blues as Blade Runner plus True Detective plus District 9, meld with the weird worlds of Jeff Vandermeer, Philip K. Dick, and China Miéville. So definitely a little bit familiar with Jeff Vandermeer, right?
Yeah. So yeah, mushrooms. It's like growing up in British Columbia and going out into the forest and just being very adventurous. It's like, yeah, I played video games when I grew up. I watched anime and all these different things, but I also really appreciated the sublime sort of aspects of nature and just being able to go out in the forest and breathing the fresh air and flipping over logs and looking at bugs. And mushrooms were just always a part of that, you know, like mushrooms were always just hanging out and they're fucking weird. But I loved the fact that it's like, what is this thing that looks so strange? And I would just like take them out of the earth and like break them apart. And, you know, that was how I learned about gills or how different mushrooms have different ways of spreading their spores. It's like they take so many different shapes and we know so little about them. And so for me, it was really cool to kind of go the rest of my life and have this fascination develop through not only mushrooms and their biology, but also through psychedelics and the ways in which psychedelics really influenced me during my 20s and led me to delving deeper into the more academic side of fungi and mycology in terms of like how do these things function? Like I just spouted off to you about like mycorrhizal relationships, which is something that a lot of people might not know about, but I can just speak off the top of my head about it because I've read about it and I'm very passionate about these things. And so a lot of this knowledge just accrued over the course of my life. Yeah. And was infused into Mushroom Blues and the broader fungal verse in ways in which I was able to base them in sort of these like academic truths and these applicable facts, but then twist it in ways that benefited the story, the fiction of it. And so it's kind of like based in facts and very liberally twisted around in order to best
for the narrative. I got to take some creative liberties. I was switching over back to the cover for a little because you were mentioning gills, and so the gills are like the part of the mushroom that's right at the bottom of the cap there, right?
Yep. So it's like the big cap in the back above the Hoffman report, above the title. That is a fly agaric mushroom, which is the mushroom that was the inspiration for like the mushrooms in the Mario series, the one with like a red cap and white spots on it. So underneath that one, it has these like big ridges, which are the gills. And basically the spores accumulate between the gills and then wind is what it kind of like the mushroom releases them and wind carries them off and then disperses them throughout an environment. But there are also species of mushrooms like the ones that are in shelves on the buildings. Those are called polypores or shelf mushrooms. Those ones have more of like a spongy, porous underside. And just like the gills, the spores are released through like tubes and then out through pores. Same as like the pores that we have on skin. But I think, you know, like often much more visible with the naked eye. And so there are different methods and different sort of like biological forms that mushrooms take and have developed in order to distribute their spores.
I love the way you've taken this like intense nerdy fascination that you have but you've wrapped it in like this narrative in a way that's absolutely fascinating because you've got, of course, the mushroom head on Koji, and there's like
Mhm.
gills under there, and in those gills there's spores, and like that's actually relevant to the story in a way that like advances the narrative and isn't totally just you like being like, this is cool, you know what I mean? Like yeah, so like, I love the way you've managed to take kind of the weird but make it part of the narrative and take your fascination and carry it through the familiar police procedural. It's very
Yeah.
cool. You've
Yeah,
done
because
a
like
great job.
the mushroom people themselves, it's like they don't reproduce through spores, but the spores are kind of like extensions of them and their biology and their brains. And so there's kind of like signals that you can pick up on in the book where it's like someone is angry and like dark spores are like pouring out of their gills to kind of give you like a very visual representation. Also like an unnerving one, because who the fuck would want to be in a room where someone's just like pouring
Right.
spores out of their head?
Yeah.
So, it's like, or their like happiness and different emotions are able to be
Right.
represented through the spores and the ways in which the body language and the spores represent what this fungal is feeling.
Right. Brian says can't stay, but I just want to say, you both gentlemen and scholars.
Hi,
Thanks so much, Brian. The first chapter of Mushroom Blues is fire. Can't wait to read the whole thing. Let me tell you, I've gotten to read the first 10 chapters and it just continues to be fire. Some Okie dude says, take my money now. I say, go for it. I believe you can already pre-order the ebook on Amazon. Is that right?
Yep.
The ebook
and then paperback will probably be up on Saturday, and that'll come out on the 20th or 21st. And then after that, if you want the hardcover, I'm so excited about the hardcover though, because I'm gonna do like I've done the
so get the ebook now and then get the hardcover. Yeah.
But it's like the dust jacket is the jacket that I've designed with the typography and everything like that. But then the actual hardcover itself is just Felix Ortiz's artwork. Just to like just to like show that off and just how fucking mad it is. Yeah.
Listen, I don't want to get on a big tangent, but what the fuck is the point of dust jackets? I really don't get it. Like, I'd rather have like
it's in the name. It's in the name. They're supposed to keep dust off. I don't know.
I'd rather have like
off your book.
Like the Threadlight omnibus that just looks super cool on the hardcover, and I didn't get it with a dust jacket. I guess you can get like a sleeve, but
yeah, I don't know. Apparently, people's books got real dusty.
And right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, dude. It will be in paperback. Just a day or two after the ebook is out on the 19th.
Yep. There you go.
But yeah, like, I don't know. I think it's just one of those trends that is probably rooted in decisions that were made like back in the 1800s.
Right.
Or even earlier than that. But then again, like all the old books that we saw, it's just like a plain hardcover.
Right, which is also not that cool, Yeah. Anyway, okay, and I wanted to mention too briefly. I don't want to give a lot of spoilers, but there is this one scene that like really stuck out to me, it's somewhere in those first 10 chapters where they're in a room with like mushroom people, and there's like this basically mold as art on the wall, like dynamic art, and I was like, that is so cool. I can kind of envision it, and like it was neat, and that like I want to see it.
if only mold did that, you know what I mean? But basically what I came up with is like there's like architecture, and the very world itself can be like constructed out of mycelium. And so mold was just like an extension of that. And so what you're referring to is a particular scene in a bar where a wall has a mold mural on it, and the mold is like it takes like form in like different colors, and kind of like you were saying, like creates this motion art. But that also extends later on in the book, where there's like they go to a restaurant and there's like, those cafes and stuff where they have pictures all over the wall with like the owner with different people and whatnot. It's that kind of thing, but it's literal mold growing from the walls, taking the form of photography. So it's just like those are the kinds of things where I could use various aspects of mold and fungi, and deepen the world building to give you the sense that like the fungal people wouldn't be using cameras.
Yeah,
You know, what form would their photography take, or like their way of representing certain things like art or what have you. And so it was just one of those little details that I put into the book as a way of deepening the richness of the culture that these fungal people have.
Love it. Yep. Tori, I see your message. So glad that I'm
Thank
sure
you,
you're gonna
Tori.
dig it. Yep. And some okie dude, you know, noir,
Yeah.
science fiction, weirdness.
I got you, man.
sign me
It's
up.
really fucking weird. So I got you.
But it, like, I mean, but it's weird, and it's weird, but it's also like accessible because again, it's all wrapped under the like police procedural. You know, it's yeah. So
That's something that Stephen Arian actually made me realize, was kind of like how I went into this like knowing that I wanted to blend genres,
yeah,
but I didn't exactly have intentions there. But the intentionality is like by accident, that I used familiar frameworks like, you know, police procedurals, murder mystery, thrillers, crime thrillers in particular, and allow people to become a part of this world and this experience through familiar beats and tropes that they've experienced time and time again. So people who are really into police procedurals, I got you. The book starts out, it's the very first chapter. It starts out at a crime scene, but then throughout the book you have those pillar moments of, you know, talking to the forensics technicians, talking to the higher up, like the captain or the you know, like the chief, what have you, interacting with different people in the on the police force, autopsies, interrogation, that kind of stuff that people really love and expect from these genres. But then I was able to make it all so much more weird and often very disgusting through my use of fungi and body horror.
And like you said, you've got these moments where characters are like pissed off and they're just ejecting like dark spores. Yeah,
it's so much more like cringy than that. Like,
well, I don't want to give spoilers.
I told friends, I've told friends, like, people are going to read this book and they're either going to be like really fascinated by mushrooms or really disgusted by them. And my hope is that it kind of treads the line, or sort of like threads the needle between the two. Yeah, where they're both fascinated and disgusted at the same time. Noki Dude is asking, like, were you inspired by the New Weird? You know, like Miéville, Vandermeer. New Weird is one of my favorite genres. And I just adore so much of that canon. And I think Philip K. Dick is like the OG weird author. You know, he's just he infuses so much of like his personal life into his stories and psychedelics and things like that. You're never going to read weirder stuff than what Philip K. Dick wrote. And it's kind of mind-boggling that so many of his books were adapted into some of the biggest movies of all time. Like Blade Runner is based on his book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Minority Report is based on his short story, Minority Report. Man in the High Castle, the TV series, was based on his book, Man in the High Castle. But those are more of his, like, well, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is really fucking weird. Blade Runner kind of refined it to be as palatable as possible. But so many of his other stories are just like bonkers, like Ubik, Valis. There's a really strange one called The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, where it's basically like a guy who lives in a Mars colony and it's super desolate and life sucks. It's shit. And they basically like take psychedelics and they have these like play sets of like neighborhood house, you know, like little dolls and stuff. And they take these psychedelics and basically enter into an imagined reality of being those people in that neighborhood or in that particular house. It's kind of like transferring your consciousness into this like hallucination of inhabiting this house and living a life that is so much better than the shitty life that you have in reality. So it's kind of like a metaphor for the ways in which people use things like technology and even entertainment to remove themselves from their own reality. And so much of his work is just like, it's very much like that. And it's very strange. But these authors were so inspirational for me. And Caden's asking, what is your best weird book recommendation? I have to say Annihilation by JEFF VANDERMEER is probably like my top pick. That's the book that made me decide I want to be a professional writer.
Nice.
That is the book that like changed my life.
So
And
go ahead.
And for me, it's kind of like there's a movie adaptation of it, which is good, but it's not a direct adaptation. I think the book and the series, it's like Annihilation, then Authority, and Acceptance is the trilogy. And I think he's writing a fourth book actually. That's sort of like an extension of that world. And
so go ahead.
And I think Annihilation is kind of like a very good representation of how New Weird both captures experimental world building, but also experimental prose and approaches to craft. It just balances the two so well, and it is so evocative, and it is so disturbing, and it is so beautiful. Nice.
But so you've given me a perfect segue though, because I want to get into you. I want to talk about like kind of your personal life. And you mentioned that like, you know, that book was what made you want to be a professional writer, but this is your debut, so you've been doing lots of stuff in life before like doing writing, right? I mean, I'm sure you've done some other writing, but I want to get into like so much stuff that, you know, you talked a little bit about born in British Columbia, or raised in British Columbia, and all the crazy interesting wildlife there, which is cool. I know that you also spent time in Berlin. I know that like while you were in Berlin, you met your wife, which I think is a fun story and I want to talk about.
Not in Berlin.
I know, right, right. You mentioned the cool bookstore that's in Berlin in another chat, because I've been stalking some of your crazy your crazy book tour that you've been doing, Adrian. You know,
can I just like shout out the name of that place?
Hell yeah.
So it's called Otherworld is the name of the bookstore. Strictly science fiction, fantasy, horror, both in German and English, but with a very, very knowledgeable and passionate staff.
Love it. Yeah. So real quick, there's a bunch of you here. Everyone, feel free to say hi. Feel free to drop in questions. Feel free to like and subscribe. Appreciate it. But yeah, Adrian, like, tell us, like, how did you go from British Columbia over to Berlin? What brought you there? I want to hear the story of like how you met your wife, because I think that's dope. I want to hear about like tattooing, and I want to hear about the tattoo studio that you had in Quito. I think that COVID shut down your tattoo studio, right? Okay. And that's about the time that you finally actually started the podcast, which you know, we all know and love, right? And at least I do. And then that I'm not sure if like when you we'll get to the podcast. So start telling me like, you know, traveling or living all over the world, all this, like, I want to know everything about you, Adrian. Hit us.
Yeah. So like, I'm very much the kind of person that gets bored of not necessarily things so much as places. I grew up in a really small town. And so when I graduated, I was like, I need to move. So I moved to Vancouver and studied at the University of British Columbia,
which is not so much a small town.
No, Vancouver is definitely not. I mean, it's like a Canadian town. It's like 2.5 million, which is not nothing, but it's also not like holy shit.
Yeah. Sure.
But Vancouver really helped me to find my feet in terms of developing a sense of independence. And then I started a trend, actually a class that I took in university in 4th year. That was part of my English literature major, was called Post-Apocalyptic Landscapes. And my teacher was like super fucking weird. This like really eccentric professor with like, you know, like short cropped, like violet dyed hair. This woman was just like so strange. But not only did I discover Philip K. Dick through that class, which was part of my sort of resurgence of reading science fiction and fantasy and just kind of like consuming it so much over the course of the rest of my life up until now. But I also met my then girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, in that class because we sat on either side of a guy that we both knew. So because of this mutual friend, we met, and then we ended up dating. And then we graduated, and she said, like, I'm going to do my master's, and had a list of different places in Europe, and was basically like, you know, I got an option in Berlin, I've got an option in Prague, another one in Paris. And I was like, I'm getting kind of tired of Vancouver. How about like whichever university accepts you,
Yeah.
I'll move there with you. And so this started a trend of me moving across the world for love, which is just something that is kind of like the spark that ignites my fire to go somewhere else and try something new. And we ended up moving to Berlin, where I lived for 3.5 years. I've met some of the most incredible people in my life there, had some of the most incredible experiences, was able to travel around Europe, you know, did like a 3-day trip with one of my friends to Norway. And we just rented a cabin in a fjord and ended up in the middle of an Arctic hurricane and saw the Northern Lights.
Nice. Northern Lights is big time bucket list.
Yeah, like
so.
just outside of Tromsø is where we went.
Okay.
And that's inside the Arctic Circle.
Right.
And then like another time went with 2 friends to actually one of them is the one half of Spore, which is the production duo who did the Mushroom Blue soundtrack.
We haven't even talked about that. We got to. Okay,
we'll get into it later. We'll get into it later.
Yeah.
So me and him and another friend, we went on a trip to Italy. We basically packed up our bicycles in boxes and flew down to Naples. And one of our best friends lives in Positano, which is on the Amalfi Coast. Super beautiful. Yeah. We just like landed in Naples, built our bikes, and biked from Naples to Positano. Stayed in Positano for like a week, and then left Positano, and then went back to Naples and took a ferry to Sardinia, which is one of the major islands off the coast of Italy. So we took a ferry, like a 14-hour ferry. Basically, just like slept on the floor of this ferry overnight. Had a red eye on this ferry, and woke up in Sardinia. And for the next 3 weeks, we biked along the coast and slept on beaches. And we had a portable stove, and we just like bought little gas tanks, bought whatever local produce or like meat or whatever we could find in like little towns. And then we would just go to the beach and we would cook and we would hang out and do mushrooms and just have a great time. And
Adrian, have you considered writing an autobiography? This is awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And that was actually the second time that I'd read Dune by Frank Herbert. So the first time I read it was in high school. The next time I read it was during this trip. It was the only book I brought. And basically we're like biking along these
while you were on psychedelics?
Not why, like during the trip. I wasn't on psychedelics the whole time.
You know?
there was free time that we had where we just like hang out. We had hammocks and stuff, and we would just like read and chat.
Yeah. Nice.
And so I was reading Dune while having this experience of being like very conscious of water, because water is very heavy. And because we were on bicycles and we were sleeping on beaches, we had to be very conservative about how we stored our water and where we got it from and where we were going to get our next bottle or whatever. But it was a beautiful experience. I was able to visit like incredible places all over Europe. And one of those experiences was my roommate asking me if I wanted to go to Barcelona on a trip with him. And so I said, yeah, like, fuck it. I got nothing to do. At that time, I was a freelance tattoo artist because a Polish friend of mine invited me to his house after work one night to just hang out and drink beers. Hi, Caden.
like you are giving Liz Gilbert with her Eat, Pray, Love a run for her money right now, you know?
All right. Eat, pray, do mushrooms.
And travel the world for love, you know?
Man,
why not? Yeah.
Travel the world for love, man. Get high.
There you go.
So my Polish friend, he invited me over for beers. Another friend joined us. We went over to his place. He opens his backpack and he just starts pulling out all this tattoo equipment. I had no idea what was going on, but I had tattoos at that point, so I knew what the stuff was.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, like I just got back from Poland. I bought all this stuff from a friend in a tattoo studio. I want to start tattooing. And he tattooed our friend, And then he asked me if I wanted one, and I asked like, can I try it myself? And did this that little like tree that's right there.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the first tattoo I ever did. That was on myself.
So you, like this kind of?
Yeah. Like you just stretch your skin out on a table. You basically just
Yeah.
like get like a surface, and skin is actually like very, because we sweat, it's very sticky. So you just find a table and you just like smush your arm into it and stretch, and then you're
Yeah.
able to tattoo with one hand.
That's freaking cool.
And so after that, like my coworkers saw it, they were just like, dude, that's so fucking cool. Like, can you tattoo us? And what this Polish friend and I did is we started doing tattoo parties where both of us would practice with his equipment. I would pay him just for some materials.
Yeah.
And then we would just tattoo like 3,
Wow.
4, 5 people and just like smoke weed and drink. It was a very like punk kind of vibe,
Right.
but I just loved it. And eventually he bought new equipment and sold his tattoo machine to me. And I started tattooing more and more. I started practicing on myself. I started practicing on friends. And it got to the point where I was able to like start having a customer base just by word of mouth. And
Right.
eventually I was able to quit my job working at a clothing store to tattoo full time and
Amazing.
basically just like work out of my apartment. So I just had like,
Oh wow, really?
like I started investing in furniture and had a, like my apartment with some people that I'd never met at that point, but they had this beautiful apartment that was 2 floors. It was on the ground floor, but it was like main floor plus the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And like my roommates were DJs, music producers, coders,
Yeah.
just like very, very like creative and technical people.
Yeah, but very punk
confident.
also. Yeah.
Very punk. And I was like, can I set up a tattoo studio here? They're like, yeah, sure.
Fuck yeah. Right.
And
Right.
so I started doing that. And because Berlin is not that expensive, I was able to sustain myself and
Really?
continue to grow my customer base just by doing tattoos. And I ended up doing that for over 6 years, So I would just like
right, partially in Berlin and then partially in Quito.
It started
Was
out
that-
in Berlin,
Right.
So it's like I started tattooing in 20 what was it? I started tattooing in like 2014.
Was it 20? Yeah.
2014, yeah. And stopped tattooing in the
With
pandemic.
pandemic,
So
yeah.
Yeah. Or sorry, 2020. Yeah. So 6 years is like more or less how long I was tattooing. So that trip to Barcelona that I went on with the roommate, the one who told me like, yeah, fuck it, dude, start a tattoo studio in our house. We went to Barcelona, had a really, really great time. The final night that we were there was a Sunday.
Uh-huh.
And shit all happens on Sunday in terms of like, let's go out and party. But
really? Oh, interesting. Like, because I mean, like, I feel like American culture. Shit all meaning nothing happens. Nothing happens.
Nothing
happens. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Sunday is not the night where people go out to party.
Right. Friday night's the night. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Sunday night, final night there. Our friend in Barcelona, the one we were staying with, says like, hey, there's a party. It's called caldo de gallina, which just means like hen soup in Spanish. I'll let all of you decipher the context of that one. Mm-hmm. And so we went to this party, and it was a very like posh club. That's like everyone. It was the final night for that club of the year, and everyone was wearing like tuxedos. And it was like a James Bond themed party. So it was like Dia de los Muertos with like tuxedos and dresses and fancy stuff.
How were you dressed?
My friend loaned me a button up because it's like I didn't own a button up at that point. But immediately we get into the club and I take it off because I'm like, I don't want to wear that shit. But we had a great time. And the music was just like bumping, like we were having drinks, we smoked some weed. And at some point in the night, like my friend and I are dancing, and this girl comes up to us, and she's from Texas. And she just looks at us and she's like, hey boys, it's my birthday. And she fucking blew sparkles from her hand into our faces. It's like some like coked out pixie, just like, hey boys, and just blow some sparkles into us.
I love it.
But we ended up like talking to her and her friends, and one of those friends is now my wife. We met that night and ended up talking for hours and hours and hours. While everyone, hi boys,
this feels right.
We ended up talking for hours, and it just like really clicked. and
Yeah.
we ended up like becoming friends on Facebook, which is the only reason that we were able to continue being in touch. I went back to Berlin. The next morning, she writes me like, "Hey, do you want to go out for breakfast?" And I was like, "I'm already at the airport."
I would love to, but
yeah.
yeah.
You know, that's just life. But I went back to Berlin and we ended up getting back in touch. And then we ended up talking a lot and we ended up calling each other over Skype and just like
Yeah.
chatting for hours. And then we just decided like, hey, like I want to come visit you again in Barcelona. And then she came to Berlin and stayed with me for a month. And then I went back to Barcelona. And then she graduated and I was like, I have to go back to Ecuador. This has been really fun. And I was like, I'm getting tired of Berlin. I'm going to go to Ecuador. For what? Love.
For love.
For love, man. And now it's like,
amazing.
now we have like a beautiful life here. We got 2 boys. We got married. Her family's amazing. I learned Spanish. Love Ecuador. Love its culture. Love its food. Love its people. I can go to the Galapagos. I can go to Amazon. Just, you know, only until like the last like year where the political situation has just gotten really shit because it's South America and it's very politically unstable. Thank you, CIA. But
yeah,
it's just an unfortunate kind of twist on a country that I'm very, very fond of because I've almost lived here for 8 years. So that's
amazing.
That's like the short version, man.
Yeah. I mean, we can't possibly compress your whole life into a brief conversation.
No.
But fucking crazy, man. Yeah, go to Berlin, fucking party it up. Like, you know, you were selling clothes, but then you're like, you know what, tattooing is pretty cool. So you start doing like tattooing out of like a freaking apartment, and then you're just traveling all over the world, living life, being dope, like building experiences, and end up in Barcelona. Clearly you must not have been at that point with the previous girlfriend that brought you to Berlin, but now
we'd already broken up at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Then
you went back to Canada and I was just like, I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah. And then met your now wife in Barcelona, getting together, still tattooing in Berlin. But then she graduated, so she was in school in Barcelona.
Yep.
And so she graduated and she was going back home to Ecuador, and you're like, fuck it, I'll check it out. And you had never been to Ecuador at that point, right?
No, I'd never been to South America either. The closest I'd ever been was Mexico and the Dominican Republic.
And how much Spanish did you speak at that time?
Nothing.
No, you listen.
Basic. ¿Cómo estás?
Right.
And I would say it like that. I would say it like, not, you know, I could say it like, hey boys, it's my birthday, ¿cómo estás? But it was like, no, I knew like cerveza, ¿cómo estás?
Yeah.
Me llamo.
¿Dónde está el baño, por favor?
Yeah. Where can I shit? Where can I shit and get a beer?
Right.
But like bare bones.
Yeah.
Live, love, and do shrooms. Exactly.
Right.
So
and read mushrooms.
But it took me like 2 years to pick up Spanish. But I dedicated myself to it.
My abuelo was born and raised in Argentina, and he was
Argentinian
in the Argentine
Spanish. No offense, is like terrible.
Terrible. Okay.
I just like cannot stand listening to Argentinian Spanish.
That's funny. Well, I have like no Spanish, and it's sad. But anyway, he was in the Argentine Navy. He came to the United States. He met my abuela, who was originally from Puerto Rico, but she was living in Philadelphia because the Argentine Navy was buying surplus World War II ships from the U.S. Navy.
Wow.
So, right. He ended up falling in love with my abuela, and he ended up moving to Philadelphia. They lived in Argentina for a while, but then a civil war broke out, and they're like, no. So they moved to Philadelphia. And the only words
they were there during like the Pinochet years, weren't they?
I think so. But the only words he knew when he came to the United States were no and banana, because those are the same in Spanish as they are in English. That was a joke. So you knew at least those two, even
they're basics though. But it's like I had to rely a lot on body language to communicate, like with my now in-laws, and thankfully, like my wife's friends all speak English, so we're able to get by that way. But
wild, man. Okay, so you come to Quito too, and how long is it before you start up your tattoo studio in Quito, Ecuador?
How long was it? I think it was like I was tattooing out of my apartment again,
Mhm.
basically just like tattooing my wife's friends and people that they knew, and
Yeah.
accumulating like a sort of a network and friendships and stuff like that, and word of mouth. And then I opened my tattoo studio in 2019,
Mhm, mhm.
and then a year
Oh, man.
later,
Yeah, that
yeah,
sucks.
and then a year later the pandemic hit. So
When you moved to Ecuador, were you like immediately living with your now wife?
no, because
'Cause
Catholic
you
families, yeah.
right.
You
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just like, "No, you can't live
Yeah,
together
yeah.
until you get married."
Right, right.
But
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 still, like, the fact
we
that
lived
they,
in the
like
same neighborhood, and
yeah.
we would just, like, spend a lot of time together, like, with her family too, and eventually, like, we decided, like, we're going to get married, but just,
Yeah.
like, based on the proposal and knowing me, her family was like, "Yeah, it's cool."
I can't like the fact that you are married at all to like a South American woman with a Catholic family, where you came over to the country being like, yeah, I'm a fucking tattoo artist and I travel and
You
like
know
do
what's so
shrooms and
funny?
whatever, you know?
Can you
Like
imagine, like,
it must be
2
so cool.
they're not, like, crazy strict Catholics,
Sure.
like, they're quite flexible in that regard, but can you
Yeah.
imagine, like, a Latina going to her parents and being like, "My boyfriend's coming over from Europe. He's a
Yeah, right.
tattoo artist." What kind of expectation do those
That's what I'm
parents have, and
saying,
how
right?
fucking dreadful. They're
Right.
just like, "No," like, and then I show up and I'm like some, like, scrawny Canadian dude with, like, fucking, like, Studio Ghibli tattoos and stuff.
Right, right. They're like, what did you
Yeah,
do in college?
yeah, but at
Right.
least I wasn't like a skinhead or wasn't
No,
like a
yeah, I
gang
mean, yeah,
member.
yeah,
Could have
yeah,
been
yeah.
way worse.
You right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That's so funny. Okay, so wow, living life, love it. Um,
Live, love, do shrooms.
live, love, do shrooms. That's gonna be like every once in a while I do an
I should
interview
put I
where
should put
like
a blurb I should put a blurb on my book that just says "Live, love, do shrooms" and just, like, quote myself.
perfect, right? Yeah, yeah. Every once in a while I have like a fire interview, and I'm like, man, that line I need on a t-shirt. And I feel like this is this is a t-shirt interview. Um, so okay, I want to get back to kind of like COVID and shutting down the tattoo studio, because I feel like it seems to me that that was really instrumental in kind of getting you are where you are now with the podcast and the book and
Mhm.
everything. But before we get to that, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about kids. So how old are your kids now?
I can actually tie my kids into this story.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So COVID happens, and it's like Ecuador, much like places like the States, experienced a lot of lockdowns and just a lot of just like uncertainty about what was going on. The the pandemic really kicks off in like February, March, April.
Hmm.
And at that point, like my wife had already gotten pregnant, and
Hmm.
we were expecting our first son in August of that year. So
Okay.
he was born during the pandemic.
Hmm.
Um, but what ended up happening is like we spent so much time at home together, and that actually created like a really beautiful intimacy, like around like the baby and the pregnancy process and all that.
Yeah.
And when he was born, it was just like unbelievably beautiful to witness all of this unfolding. And he got to basically like his first months were just with us, just with my wife and I. And towards like Christmas of that year is when we started seeing family. So it's like we had a very intimate start with
Yeah.
him. And
That's so nice.
once things started to kind of settle back into normalcy, mostly in like 2021,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that fucking fever dream of a pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
joke with friends. They are always like, oh, we're going to shut everything down for 2 weeks just so we can get
yeah,
like kind of our hand. Yeah. 2 fucking weeks. Right. Right.
two
Right.
fucking weeks, right?
Right.
What ended up happening is that my wife works for her dad's company, so it's a family company, very
Okay.
stable. And because I'd stopped tattooing, I was kind of burnt out on it at that point,
Hmm.
to be honest. And the tattoo studio closing was just kind of like something that probably would have happened eventually anyways.
Hmm.
And so what we decided is that I'm going to be the stay-at-home dad, and
Hmm.
I'm going to be at home and I'm going to help raise this kid. And with that, I would have so much more time just to kind of like think and ruminate on things. And what I realized is I've always loved to draw. I've always loved, like illustration, tattooing, arts, and that kind of stuff. Okay, dude, I'm married to an Ecuadorian. Yeah.
So, married to an Ecuadorian woman that
And I
he
met
met in Barcelona, Spain,
while I
while
was
he was living in Berlin, Germany. It all makes sense. It all just keep up, man. Keep it no.
do some shrooms. Get with the program. But what that ended up giving me was an opportunity to realize, like, what are some things that I've always wanted to do but have never had the time or the confidence to pursue. And writing fiction is one of those things. I'd never finished anything at that point. I'd always be stuck in the ideation phase or just kind of like write and stop. And during that time, I spent a lot of time illustrating and doing like this kind of world building and research and just kind of like fleshing things out so much that once I decided like I'm going to do this thing and wanted to get my foot in the door in a kind of different way, which was through book blogging.
Yeah.
Just as a way to kind of like refamiliarize myself with the world of SFF and kind of feel like, how are people discussing this on social media?
Right.
What is the community like? And I just looked up a bunch of different blogs, and the first one that I ended up contacting was FanFi Addict. And so I was basically like taking care of my son, and also when he was napping or when he was sleeping at night, I would just kind of like very slowly pursue these things that I was interested in, and accruing this confidence to start thinking about like, what do I want to write, and creating the fungal verse and talking to my friends about it and drawing and going down rabbit holes of mushrooms and all these different things. And at the same time, giving me the confidence through the book blogging community to review books and think about them more critically. And I realized like podcasting is something I've always loved. I listened to my first podcast in 2007. It was for I was really like, I love video games, but I was like huge into video games. But it was a website called One Up.
I half expected you to tell me it was a podcast about mushrooms.
No, so it was a website called One Up, and it was a video game website, and they had a podcast called One Up Yours, and that was like the first podcast I ever listened to. And just like loved like video game podcasts, but then it's like I started realizing, oh shit, there are people talking about other things, and so it's explore podcast in all of its various forms. And I talked to one of my friends for years about starting a podcast, but we just never did it. And then I realized like, what's stopping me? And I love sci-fi and fantasy, so why don't I just start my own podcast as part of, as part of FanFi Addict. So SFF Addicts, I pitched it to everybody. Nobody wanted to do it. So I was like, okay, fuck it. I'll do it myself.
Nice.
And have it be sort of like an outlet for me to be able to socialize in a situation like being a stay-at-home dad, where there is a lot of sort of social isolation. Especially when they're younger and they're not going to school and stuff like that. And give myself that sort of freedom and time to be an adult talking about the things that I'm really passionate about. And at the same time, because I'm hosting incredibly talented people whose books I love, I could pick their brains and be a little bit selfish and interview them with the intention that these are things that I want to know. And hopefully it's stuff that other people will want to know as well. Love it. And that was kind of like the foundation for me to be like, I'm absorbing everything I can from the people I'm interviewing and becoming friends with a ton of people through podcasting and through the author community, through the SFF community and the blogging community, and just like building slowly as I meet these people and am in awe of what they do. But that also that example being something that shows me it's possible for me to do this as well.
Right. Adrian, I want to keep talking, but I also want to be respectful of your time because we've already been going for a long time. And this would be an okay place to stop if you need to run. So
No, I'm good, man. I'm good.
Hell yes. All right.
Okay, Doug. Okay, dude. Quick thing. He said,
ahead.
"Have you played Last of Us?" Yes. Adore that
Yep.
series.
Yep.
Really like the show, but the video game is just like so close to my heart. And that was like a major inspiration as well for aspects of Mushroom Blues, particularly the body horror elements.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go back. Just of course, we've had lots of people been joining us as we've been going on, which is fantastic. Thanks you guys for joining. Thanks for hanging out. The vibe lately has been, live, love, and do shrooms. But of course, we're also talking about Mushroom Blues, which is Adrian's debut novel. Go check it out. The ebook's already available for pre-order on Kindle, so pick it up. You're gonna love it. I love too, though, that like you were just talking about how essentially like your kids kind of spurred you towards doing writing, because I had a really similar experience actually. I wrote a book many years ago, and then just kind of shelved it, and shelved writing and got a job that earned money because the writing wasn't earning money. Right, and did that
so pragmatic.
Right. But my daughter was born, and my daughter kind of similar, although like she didn't arrive on the scene until after the pandemic started, because after lockdown we needed something to do, right? So
spend all our time fucking.
Wow.
It's tiring, Nicholas. It's tiring, man.
Just right to the right.
Why can't we just eat mushrooms and we just just wait for a brisk wind and just
I was gonna be a little coy about it, but you're just like, yeah, right there. All right, cool. But so my daughter was born, and when she was very, very young, she demanded to be held while she's sleeping, and the phone was kind of distracting, and I couldn't play like Clash of Clans very well with one hand, but I could hold my Kindle really well and like flip a page with one hand. Yeah.
Yes, dude, that's exactly what I did. I would just you would sleep on my shoulder, and I would fucking burn through books.
Yes, that escalated quickly.
Oh, that's how things go. Things escalate. That is life.
But no, same. I was burning through books, and it was great because like I've always been a reader, like ever since I was quite young, but I did kind of like just sort of fall out of the habit in favor of some easier things to consume, but it was great to kind of get back into it, and then getting back into reading made me want to get back into writing. So I definitely like my daughter's going to have to get a dedication in some book someday, it's amazing that you kind of had such a somewhat similar experience. But I'd love to hear though, you're like, drop my mouse, my bad. Your day job is still like stay-at-home dad, but you've got the podcast going on, and you've got this book that you've written, and now you're doing this massive book tour. So what is like your day-to-day like right now, and how do you kind of make time for all of these different creative endeavors while you're also taking care of your two boys?
Schedules.
Yeah. Okay.
I have an app on my phone called Things, and I basically map out my day in terms of like whether it's like a daytime thing or a nighttime thing, but also in terms of priority. Like SFF Addicts at this point, like I changed the format when I brought on MJ as my co-host.
Right.
And it's much more sustainable. We only record twice a month.
Right.
We
record,
we record two interviews back to back with a single author.
Right.
And so for us, it's like recording twice a month is like, cool, that's manageable. And then for me, in terms of editing, basically Friday is like my editing day. And I can just edit over the course of Friday. And for me, like what has become very apparent is it doesn't have to all happen at once. And this applies to everything that I do. Even if I can just work like 15 minutes on something while my son's napping, for example, that 15 minutes gets me closer to my goal.
That is something I struggle with so much. Like with like just feeling like everything does have to happen at once. Everything like
exactly. Like instead of like being like I need like 3 hours to do just like my thing, kids don't afford you that. Right. So I have, times that I know like if I want to get something done in the morning, then I wake up at 5 and I have an hour and a half to work on stuff and or exercise or whatever. And during the day, like while my son's napping, I know like this is his sleep cycle and this is what I can reasonably do within that time period. And it's like while my son's napping, it's very easy for me to do stuff on social media, for instance, or to send emails and just kind of catch up with like housekeeping and whatnot. And then nighttime is when I am able to record stuff. Like MJ and I, like thankfully we were able to record a lot during the evening, depending on where our guests are. Or evening time is like, get a lot of writing done or whatever it is I have to do. But I've gotten to the point where I like, no, even if I can't spend like a solid chunk of time doing this thing, 15 minutes affords me a lot. Half an hour affords me a lot. And with writing, I use this app basically, and I just like throw notes and ideas into the app, and it syncs up with my MacBook. And so then I'll just go through that when I have like a more solid chunk of time ahead of me and incorporate it into whatever I'm working on at that particular time. And so a lot of it is about just like using this app as a way to schedule and manage my time.
Right.
So that I know like this is the thing I can do today. So I'll just put like, I'll do this thing in between like 9 and 10 a.m. Or this thing like I'll do in the evening, whatnot. And it's almost like quantifying it and turning it into a game where you get a little dopamine hit each time you like click that checkbox and that thing disappears off of your list.
Yeah.
And so that's its own reward in and of itself, is to be able to use that quantification to be productive. But, like Dr. Love is in there. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you have to pace yourself and figure out when is the best time for me to move faster and get a lot of stuff done, or pull back and realize like this is family time or this is meal time or whatever.
Right. I love that. And I find that really interesting. And I think like, I want to like spoiler, I want to do a panel with you and with Andrew later. And we want to talk about kind of writing while doing other creative work. So I don't want to give too much of that like away, but I think you've already kind of touched on how it's so important to have like kind of that adult socialization, and the podcast provides that for you. Because I find that doing this is so helpful for me. If I'm only doing one or the other, like the writing or these interviews, it gets a lot less fun. But being able to bounce between the two somehow makes it so much more fun. You have the same experience?
Yep. It's kind of like the hype that I get from recording an interview feeds into everything else that I do. And when I start to feel a little bit of burnout, then I can kind of like rework it to not necessarily just those two things either. It's like watching movies, like playing video games, reading, drawing, exercise, like these different things, like cooking for me is like, I love cooking. So to be able to balance all of these things such that, as I mentioned earlier, I get bored with things.
Yeah.
So being able to use this like multifaceted approach to not get burnt out on any one particular thing.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Yeah. I'm excited for that conversation we're going to have too. That'll be a fun panel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about SFF Addicts. So you like, your son was born, you kind of were thinking, okay, I'm kind of tired of doing tattoo. I want to really lean into writing. And you figured that you'd sort of start really slow in terms that you were really getting kind of re-immersed into SFF and starting to do reviews, and you had the chutzpah to be like, fuck it, I'm going to do this podcast myself. I don't care if no one's going to come with me. And although I have to say, I was talking with MJ just a couple days ago, and she said that you like invited her to be your co-host on the basis of one panel interview you guys did.
Yeah.
That just sounds so great for you, because you spent like a year and a half building this thing on your own ish, right? And then you're like, come do this thing with me. And
I
you
just,
would never.
I just got a really good vibe from her though.
It's amazing. I mean, you're right. Clearly, it's worked out, and you guys are besties. But like, fuck, man, that's amazing.
Yeah, because like it started out where I was like, you know, started it out on my own.
Yeah.
First interview was with Hugh Howey and Duncan Swan because we were talking about self-publishing and SPSFC. And from there, it's just like it never slowed down.
Mhm.
Like the guests that I was getting early on, it's like crazy, man. Like episode 5, like fucking Anthony Ryan and stuff, and like just really going into it super fast and realizing that authors just love talking about this stuff.
Right. Right.
And I feel like my entire life has been me building up a skill of kind of getting a sense of people very quickly. So I can get a vibe from someone. It's like, you seem like a bit of a dick, or like this conversation is just not benefiting either of us. And I think Berlin really honed that, where I met a lot of people who were like far too addicted to cocaine and things like that, that made them very self-centered and egotistical. And so that opened my eyes to like, this is the kind of energy that will drain you more than sustain you.
Right.
These are the energy vampires of life.
Yes.
I don't want to spend my life being around energy vampires, because eventually with an energy vampire, you become an energy vampire.
Damn.
And so for me, like, you know, I was doing panels with X amount of authors like every 2 weeks, but it was like 3, 4, 5 authors and coordinating all of that and the time zones. And you know how fucking shitty time zones can be. It was just a lot of work.
Anytime I'm like scheduling with an Australian, I'm like,
yeah, like fucking Ryan Cahill. It's like, what time is it, New Zealand, dude? Like,
yeah. Right.
So that for me was becoming unsustainable. And I realized like either I'm going to have to stop this or I'm going to have to change.
Yeah.
And I decided, like, I met MJ. She's really cool.
Yeah.
I put together a list of like 10 people, but like reaching out to FFF Addicts, she was just the first person I ended up writing.
Nice.
And what happened is like, she said, you know, yes, like I've been interested in doing podcasts and everything like that. She has a very good presence, an amazing personality.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just gave it a shot. We just called each other and got a feel for one another. And we decided like, yeah, let's go for this. And since then it's been amazing because, you know, I have this person that I can confide in. We've become really good friends.
Yeah.
We talk about like life and everything, but also we are able to boost each other up during very difficult times and are able to kind of support one another doing the podcast, where it's not just me coming up with questions anymore. Like we're able to bounce questions, and one person might be more familiar with an author's body of work.
Yeah, sure.
So they can kind of take the lead. So it works really well where it lessens the burden.
Right.
It lessens like the stress of the, you know, like the TBR pile and all these different kinds of things.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, like it blows my mind that it's like MJ and I have only known each other for a year and a half.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've known her for like my entire adult life.
That's those are the real ones, right? Those are the real ones.
And we even had the like amazing opportunity to meet each other in person when I was in Toronto last summer. So
nice.
Me and her and Crystal Matar and my son, we just like spent the day together and we went to the CN Tower, went to the aquarium. It was lovely. Cool. Yeah, man.
That's cool.
Aiden's asking, who are some of the upcoming SFF Addicts guests hopefuls? We got our 100th episode coming up very soon. Actually, yeah, nice. We got 100 episodes, man. Nice. So we got before that it'll be like MJ and I. She's gonna be we're gonna be doing an interview with me that'll be out next week, and then a masterclass the week after.
Have you still not recorded that one? Because you pre-record your stuff. So have you still not recorded your? We're
doing it tomorrow night.
Ah, exciting. Yeah. Okay.
Just because this week has been like crazy. So I mean, it doesn't really affect too much in terms of like the timeline or anything.
No, but like, no, it's just, yeah. I wasn't sure if you were even going to do it live, but you know, that's awesome. That's cool.
And then Sebastien de Castel, we've got him coming on the show. We've got James Logan, who's a debut author of The Silver Blood Promise, which is fantastic. Very much like Lies of Locke Lamora type vibe.
Nice.
Very, very cool. Actually, like very comparable to MJ's books Among Thieves and Thick as Thieves. I almost said Thick Ass Thieves for
Thick ass thieves. She'd kill you, right? No, she'd probably laugh. Yeah.
She laughs. People review it on Goodreads and they call it Thick Ass Thieves. So
Thick ass thieves. Yeah.
But yeah, and then some hopefuls is like we've got like, you know, some authors planned out for the summer.
Nice.
But hoping to talk to Veronica Roth about her new
Oh,
book.
nice.
We've got Stephen Arion coming on. I really want to interview James S.A. Corey, which is actually 2 people.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Daniel Abraham.
Nice.
So hopefully we can get both of them on, and then
I think they're like releasing new stuff soon too, right?
Yeah, there's one coming out in August, so hopefully we can.
Yeah, so they would. That seems like a good time. Yeah, that's sick. That's sick.
And then we're thinking of like kind of expanding a little bit and introducing like more kind of like writing adjacent stuff, like maybe bringing some booktubers to do a master class on content creation or something like that.
Yeah, that seems cool.
Yeah.
I would watch that. I remember. Well, okay, briefly, I want to just shout out again. There's been a bunch of people joining and whatnot. So I'm talking with Adrian M Gibson. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks for talking. Thank you, Adrian, for all your time and everything. His debut novel's Mushroom Blues. I'm showing the cover. Super hot. It's available for pre-order right now on Amazon. Go get it. You're gonna love it. Yeah, I remember like been talking about the SFF Addicts, which of course Adrian's the co-host of. I remember when you brought on MJ and you're like, we're changing the format, and I was like, I was sus, dude. I was sus, you know. But like, no, as a fan, right? No, but no. But obviously, it's very much worked out. I've been,
particularly for MJ and I too. We started the Patreon and stuff. And you know, we've had like steady support through that. That's basically been like our book fund, or MJ has been using it for like buying books.
Nice.
But I actually used it to save up a ton on my PayPal, and I used it to pay Felix for his cover art. So
I'm happy I helped you pay for your cover. Right.
Yeah.
And also repping the merch. Go get the merch. I love the merch too. Keep reading, keep imagining. I like it. So how, Bo, I really like your question. I want to get to that in just a second, but kind of piggybacking off what Caden said, like, how do you and MJ decide who you're going to interview on any given time?
We just kind of toss out. It's more or less based on who has releases coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
Because for me, I know it's how beneficial it is to have an interview be a part of sort of like the hype train and build up to it. And so it's like
about your own book tour. That small thing you've been doing. That's small.
Yeah. And I think it's beneficial. Like the authors really appreciate, like we release an episode like on book birthdays and stuff like that, where the author gets like an extra boost based on our interviews.
Right.
So most of it is based around that. But we'll see like who's putting out books, who have we not talked to yet, who might be like keen to talk about like a particularly interesting masterclass topic.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just us sending text messages back and forth and kind of like mapping things out and seeing like who's got something coming up. And for me, it's like really easy because SFF Addicts and TBR Con have put me in contact with
so many. Yeah.
Whether it's the author themselves directly, and I have the honor of being able to just like shoot a direct email to a bunch of different authors, or if it's like their publicist at whichever publishing house, like Tor, Orbit, or
with Christopher Paolini. Were you contacting him directly, or was it like publicist?
No, that was through Tor. Yeah. And Martha Wells as well. Yeah.
That's cool. How many folks have been like repeat guests?
It was a lot more repeat guests when I was doing the panels.
Mm-hmm.
Because those ones were I could bring in people who had like a particular fascination with that topic, but with the interviews is kind of I brought on people that I had during the panel era, like Andrea Stewart or Fonda Lee, and then now my friend Fraser Armitage is doing interviews for the Fanfatic YouTube channel, and I'm putting him in touch with a lot of the authors that I've had on in the past. So the two of us are able to kind of like provide these in-depth chats with authors, but just in different contexts.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
We are so close to 100 live viewers, and that would tickle me quite a lot to have 100 live viewers. But a lot of you are watching on Twitter or X, which is super cool. If you're on X, if you want to retweet, I would love it. But
X,
also,
it's not X, man. I refuse.
yeah, you're right. If you're on Twitter, if you want to retweet, that would be great.
If you want
But
to
also,
re-X, I don't know what it is.
you're right. If you want to go find me on YouTube, that would absolutely make my day. If you found me on YouTube and liked and subscribed, that would be so great. But I appreciate you here, however you're watching. Thank you, and thank you for watching. Okay, so we talked a little bit about SFF Addicts, talked a little bit about MJ. What, Adrian? Okay, there's 3 or 4 more things that I'd like to talk about. So I want to talk about your book tour and at least talk about kind of what's been your most like rewarding thing that you've done. You mentioned in another part of your book tour, because I've been listening to your interviews, some of them. You mentioned that you have really, really vivid dreams, and I think that's been something that has kind of influenced some of your writing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. We talked briefly about the soundtrack, the companion soundtrack that's available for Mushroom Blues, and I feel like we absolutely
also available for pre-order on Bandcamp. Just search up the band Spore Mushroom Blues, and you'll go find that.
And then we could spend time talking about Mass Effect, but at some point we probably need to sleep too. So
I feel like you should just have MJ and I can also invite Jenny Dewis, JS Dewis, because she's like a mega fan and now works for Humanoid Games, which was a studio that is founded by the creative director of the entire Mass Effect trilogy.
Bro, you want to make a Mass Effect panel for my show? I am so here for it. I would so here for it.
Hell yeah.
All right, so we'll save Mass Effect for another night. But let's start. I mean, let's talk about the soundtrack, and then tell me about like the book tour and what's been the crazy virtual book tour that you've set up, and what's been. Yes, we've hit 100. Thank you. Thanks, you. That feels so cool. Okay, so soundtrack, because you have a companion soundtrack that's coming out with Mushroom Blues, and you have a couple cassette tapes of it available. Fucking cool. Tell us all about that.
So the friend that I was like cycling with in Sardinia and thank you, okay dude. The friend that I met in Berlin and we were like doing mushrooms on beaches and stuff. He's a really talented DJ and music producer, and he went to school for sound engineering. And he's Swedish, so he lives in Stockholm now. But we've just stayed in touch over the years. And I thought like I love the idea of sort of like multimedia experiences and how amazing music is at enhancing the experience that you have with any particular medium. Movies and television are a very good example of this. And I haven't seen that many books that have like soundtracks and stuff. So I was like, fuck it, man. I would love to just hit him up and come up with an idea for like, let's do a soundtrack for this.
Yeah.
So he said yes right off the bat. But he was like, I'll hit you back like tomorrow because I want to ask someone something. So he went to one of his friends who he studied with sound engineering. And he comes back to me the next day, sends me a screenshot or like a picture from a phone just of this guy's notebook where it says like mycelium, like concept album idea, mycelium, like mycelium concept album.
Nice.
I was like, that is a very perfect person to do a soundtrack with. Right. And so we had a call and talked about the book, and they were like, yeah, we're on board. So they ended up doing like jam sessions in order to, excuse me, in order to kind of like get a feel for what this could sound like. And they would just like send me samples with like 13 minutes of 8 different songs. And they did that a few times, and we just kind of like narrowed it down to songs that I felt really represented the world and felt very, very evocative of it. And they just knocked it out of the park. So they worked on this like over the course of the fall and into early 2024, mastered the tracks, and they sound beautiful. And then they came up with the idea after reading the book of, because there are cassette tapes in Mushroom Blues,
Okay.
and they play a part in the story. Not necessarily like
Sure.
the murder is solved with cassette tapes, I think, but it's
Right.
like Henrietta Hoffman is really into cassettes because she kind of like inherited a collection from her dad.
Oh,
And
neat.
so
Okay.
there are cassette tapes in Mushroom Blues, and then they came up with the idea of like, let's do like a small pressing of cassette tapes and sell those as like a limited edition alongside the digital soundtrack. And so yeah, there's the digital soundtrack with 8 songs, 45-minute album, and then there are the cassette tapes that are limited to 50. And yeah, you can enjoy the Mushroom Blues soundtrack in myriad ways.
Yeah.
And it's been really cool because it's like, I even like tomorrow morning there's going to be like a sampler that's going to go out, like a video sampler, but it's also going to go up on SFF Addicts podcast feed. On Bandcamp you can hear a couple tracks already.
Yeah.
And the album drops on the 19th alongside.
Yeah.
So it was just amazing to be able to collaborate with my friend again. When we were in Berlin and when he was in Vancouver, actually he lived in Vancouver for a year, and I went to visit and like did some guest spots at tattoo studios, and we put a couple of events together where we would just like book a warehouse, and I would set up like a sort of like tattoo studio, and he would set up his DJ booth, and we would have like live tattooing, live DJ sort of like parties, and it was cool to be able to collaborate again with him.
That's so right. I love when like that happens in life where, you know, there's the person, oh yeah, I used to like work with this dude and whatever. And yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Or even like when I was in university studying English lit, I worked at a restaurant where I ended up becoming friends with Nicholas Eames.
Oh really? What?
Wild.
I didn't know that's how you okay.
I was like 19, I think at the time.
Wow.
And he was writing the book that he wrote before Kings of the Wild. But we just got to know each other. It was like, he's 10 years older than me, but it was like, this dude's really into like fantasy and sci-fi. He's super fucking like cool but weird, and he drinks a lot of whiskey. And we just hit it off, and it's like we're still friends to this day. I got his book blurb on Mushroom Blues.
Mushroom Blues.
And,
nice.
You know, it's like he was very inspirational for me to, you know, see like dreams can be fulfilled. You just got to be persistent. You just got to dedicate yourself. And
love it.
Yeah. And then for the book tour, it's like, yeah, I kind of had no idea of like, this is a clear example of anyone in indie who's like done a book tour that I can emulate. So I kind of approached it from the perspective of like, I'm just going to do what I feel I'm capable of doing based on like the people that I know and the things that I like doing. And, you know, the soundtrack is a part of that. You know, the animated cover reveal trailer, I animated that.
Sick. Yeah, that was the way you put that together.
Yeah, thank you. And just like the different things, like blog posts on different guest posts on different blogs. Like these are bloggers I know, like Mihir Wanshu and the team at Fantasy Book Critic, or Beth Tabler at Before We Go blog. I have, you know, my fam at FanFi Addicts, so I was able to publish stuff there too. Also on the FanFi Addict YouTube channel, also on SFF Addicts, but also the podcasters that I know, you included, like booktubers, interviewers that I could reach out to and just be like, hey, do you want to participate in this thing? Like, how
hell yeah, I do. Right.
And so I just did what I felt I could do and what felt natural. And after I announced it, like indie authors that I know were like, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah. Like, I mean, it makes sense that like it feels natural, but like, yeah, when you see like the like dozen plus things that you're doing, it's pretty impressive that you put it all together.
And it hasn't been stressful either.
Yeah.
You know, like everything got spaced out in terms of the recording, that nothing is like jam packed. I would maybe record like the first ones I did were like in early February. The release schedule kind of creates this illusion that there's a lot happening at once. But because of everything being pre-recorded, I was able to space things out where I usually had like a day or two or even 3 to kind of like breathe and yeah.
Pretty awesome. Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned Nicholas Eames because I just finished like Kings of the Wild and I want to reach out to him and be like, hey, I'd like to talk to you.
I can reach out and see if he's interested. Yeah.
That is sick. Yeah.
The break-ins are fucking killing it, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the break-ins have been a wonderful group to be a part of. And I'm so glad that you, Adrian, invited me in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And if anyone doesn't know, the Brain-Kittens are just it's a group of 16 debut authors that have either debuted last year or planning to debut this year. And it's just kind of an opportunity for us to have a private place where we can vent and pull our hair out together and then also try to hype each other up. And it's lovely.
I would say it's like loving therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say too, like if you're planning to debut, find some people that are in a similar place. Like if I had any piece of advice for new writers, find a people wherever you're at in your journey, find people in a similar place that you vibe with, and like it's gonna make things so much better.
Exactly.
I do want to ask, I thought Bo had a really interesting question, you know, based on current location, Ecuador, what is the indie scene like down there? And how hard is it to get access to physical indie books? I think that's really. I take to tell you briefly. Like I know that like shipping is not great in South America, but I'm trying to get a book to an Australian, and it's a total pain in the ass. Also,
so indie scene here is pretty much strictly Spanish. But there are just like a lot of small presses in South America.
Okay,
so it's kind of like. It feels like an indie kind of vibe in that sense. So like there are small presses in Quito. Most of what they're publishing is Spanish. And in terms of getting indie books, it's like, I wish I could go to a bookstore. There is a bookstore here, or like several that have English sections, but they're not carrying indie books. So I can go there and I can find I found Richard Swan's book there one time and I sent him a picture and I was just like, dude, you're in Ecuador. And he was so happy. But indie books, it's like I have to order it through Amazon, and then there are like courier services, usually based out of Miami, where you can basically just like, what I would do is like I would batch order books like 3 times a year, do like a big book haul, and they have a particular rule that reduces the amount of taxes if it's only books.
Okay.
And so I would just order a bunch of books.
Yeah.
And I would have to only pay for the books themselves and the shipping, but I wouldn't be charged any taxes. So that's pretty much like how I do it. And I would include indie books in there. I would include trad books, like whatever it is that I'm hoping to read.
Yeah. ZS. Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing, Zach?
What about because so one thing that I ran into again trying to get a book to this Australian guy, and I guess the author maybe hasn't made it available in foreign places. How is it? How accessible are ebooks for you in Ecuador right now?
Easy. I just like I trick the system and have an American
VPN?
Amazon account. Yeah. I just buy my ebooks through Amazon.com and have them up onto my Kindle. So
smart, wicked smart. Very nice. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Do you want to talk about Vivid Dreams, or should we wrap it up by maybe you tell me maybe the most rewarding part of kind of the whole experience of bringing out a debut?
I can just briefly say about the Vivid Dream that inspired the Fungalverse, and then we
Hell
can
yeah. You could be not brief if you want. I just it's up to you.
Yeah, but I've always been a very vivid dreamer, and a lot of the ideas that I've had for stories or for illustrations and tattoos came from vivid dreams. I realized like when I was smoking weed a lot in Berlin, like I was dreaming less because it's just like shrooms before bed. No, if you take shrooms before bed, you do not sleep. That is what happens. You just stand up all night, you stay up all night, and you have vivid reality is what you have.
Vivid reality.
But yeah, like I would just have like crazy vivid dreams all the time. And the one that kind of kicked off the fungal verse was a dream where I was walking through a forest, and then I just like came upon a gigantic towering mushroom that was like higher than the trees, and it was bioluminescent, and it was like releasing spores into the air. And I just thought like this is the most like sublime thing ever, even though it was just in my head. And after that I started drawing, and that's when the idea started to form for the fungal verse.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Super cool. Are some of those like, obviously you've got Koji behind you, are some of the other drawings back there like from early fungal verse?
This is actually Koji's pet frog. His name's Kami.
Hold on a second. There we go.
I can bring it closer.
Nice.
So that's Kami, his pet frog, and then that's Koji. These are all tattoo designs. That one as well is from not Mushroom Blues, but the book after. not the sequel, but the second book that I'm going to release.
Yeah. So one, super cool, and two, I love that you were also like you said in your massive book tour that like there's people all over the world with like different mushroom tattoos that you've done, which is rad. That's kind of neat that your art has already had international, amazing. But yeah, someone asked, I think it was Oki Dude asked a little while ago, yeah, you got more books you plan to put out, and apparently I think you said in another place that like essentially of course you have the Fungalverse, which is going to be this shared universe that all of your work is going to be in. Okay, a lot of your work's going to be in the Fungalverse, but you have a plan for, so this is the current book, Mushroom Blues.
Do you want me to explain it to you?
I should let you talk, shouldn't I?
You look like you were getting stressed out trying to wrap your head around what I'm doing.
Okay, Hoffman Files 5 books and another series, and you're going to bounce between the two. Yeah.
Okay. No. So Hoffman Report.
Okay. No, all right.
First book. Hoffman Report is 4 books.
Okay.
So it'll be Mushroom Blues and then 3 sequels, and then my next book is going to be the start of another trilogy, or the start of a trilogy called the Kanoko trilogy. That's going to be Spore City.
Okay.
And that one will be hopefully later this year or early 2025.
Oh, okay.
And so that one is it's in 30 years in the future after Mushroom Blues, much more about like biotech and fungal tech and corporations and gangster crime families and, corporate espionage and stuff like that. So that's going to be a trilogy. I'm going to start bouncing back and forth between the Hoffman Report and the Kanoko trilogy. And then I'm going to start introducing more stuff from the fungal verse. I have a duology plan that is basically like fungal samurai set 300 years in the past. There's like short story collections that I've kind of like developed basic ideas for, potentially a comic book. If I feel like
you would illustrate.
Yeah. But then on top of that, it's like I have ideas outside of that. Like I have a duology plan that's set in Ecuador in the near future. Another series that is basically like a globe hopping cyberpunk conspiracy series. A trilogy set in British Columbia toward the end of the 21st century. So just like lots of different stuff. Maybe start dabbling in fantasy as well. I have some friends that I want to co-author with down the line. So yeah, just like a lot of ideas bouncing in my head, but I have a giant like 50-page Word document just filled with ideas. So
this is the way. I love it. I'm like not quite that many, but I definitely have like a lot of ideas, and it's just like cool. I guess I'm going to be working on these ideas for at least the next 10 years, but which is fine, That's rad. That's cool. Hey, crazy. Yeah, I love the vivid dream. You just kind of imagine the giant mushroom, and now
Mhm.
that's in the city that the book you wrote. You know, and also
Yep.
we haven't even talked. I mean, you got so much that you're putting out in conjunction with mushrooms. We haven't even talked about the map. You know, which is it's such a cool story behind the map, where your dad was a cartographer and helped you
Mhm.
design the map, and also it's of course based in like actual kind of some geography in Japan.
Mhm.
So much. Yeah, I mean, if listen. 100+ of you out there listening, if you're been enjoying this, then you need to just kind of follow along with all this amazing stuff that Adrian's been putting out, and get ready for Mushroom Blues. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, man.
All right, 2+ hours. We should probably wrap up, shouldn't we, Adrian?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I've enjoyed it, buddy. You can see the mother mushroom is this giant mile-high mushroom that dominates the city of Neokanoko. But
Yeah.
you can see it up there in the top.
Yeah, lovely.
Mhm.
Adrian, my friend, thank you. This has been
Thank
a
you, brother.
blast for 2+ hours, and I appreciate you, wanting to be on my show, inviting me into break-ins, everything. Thank you. You're wonderful.
You too.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, buddy. Thank you so much. And thank you to
Everyone,
everyone watching.
yeah, everyone watching, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thanks for chatting along. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for the likes and follows and subscribes and we treats and everything that you all have done, and of course just being here and hanging out, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for spending some time with us. And if no one's told you it today, you're an absolute legend.
Thank you, man. You too. Thank you, everybody.